This is a provincial policy. I know that Justin Trudeau has butted into that. The Prime Minister has no business in decisions that should rest with provinces and parents. So my message to Justin Trudeau is butt out and let provinces run schools.
It is impressive how Justin Trudeau has meddled in decisions that should be in the hands of the provinces. The Prime Minister has meddled in something that clearly does not belong to him. My message to him is straightforward. Stay away from the provinces and let parents raise their children. And now we have Pierre Poilievre tearing Trudeau apart live and in full color, without a filter. It was not a mild criticism, it was a real public humiliation. He told him clearly to stay out of provincial affairs and to let parents manage their children's education. And frankly, who can blame him? This is the same Trudeau who has screwed up everything from housing to health care. And now he wants to play the role of school principal when he can't even manage Canada's basic problems. Meanwhile, Trudeau takes another flight to New York to give a couple of speeches and waste tons of fuel. And what are Canadians doing? They suffer higher and higher taxes, even for the simple fact of driving to work or feeding their families. Poilievre, of course, couldn't let this contradiction pass, pointing to the cynicism of a climate warrior traveling in an emissions-packed jet to a climate conclave while telling Canadians to tighten their belts tighter. And what to say about the internal crisis. Right now, we are facing the largest federal strike in Canadian history. Workers are not getting their services. Housing prices have doubled in cost, and crime is roaming the streets. And what is Trudeau doing today? Packing for your trip to New York. Seriously, what is so urgent about visiting the Big Apple while the country is falling apart? Poilievre, in a tongue-in-cheek tone, even sang, "New York, New York," ridiculing the Prime Minister's inability to deal with domestic problems while seeking international applause. Poilievre also does not miss the opportunity to ridicule Trudeau's economic policies. At this rate, Trump must be rubbing his hands together, watching as the Canadian government is gifting the U.S. an incredible investment advantage. While Trudeau gives empty speeches, entire companies are fleeing Canada, taking their money with them and leaving Canadians out of work. Trudeau's tax policies are making Canada an unattractive terrain for business, and companies are simply escaping. And what about the issue of ethics? Trudeau, caught up in the WE charity scandal, still does not give clear answers. Poilievre puts him on the ropes, demanding to know how much money his family has received from that organization. And the Prime Minister, as always, dodges the question. How hard can it be to be honest about these issues? Trudeau has twice been found guilty of violating the Ethics Act, but he still dares to give lessons in morality. What kind of leader is that? Poilievre keeps asking Trudeau uncomfortable questions, and the latter's frustration is palpable. Every time he is questioned about the details of the WE case or about his erroneous decisions in the management of the economy, his answer is empty. Every time Trudeau tries to speak, Poilievre throws an even more difficult question at him, and he has no choice but to stumble over his own words. It is a comedy of errors. Then we have international politics. Trudeau is still in his fantasy world, pretending that other countries want to follow his wise recommendations on how to deal with the Trump administration. Poilievre is quick to debunk this myth, mocking Trudeau's claim to be a key international figure while the country is being dragged down by his bad decisions. And if we talk about the government's management, Poilievre's words are clear and forceful. Trudeau's policies are leading Canada straight to ruin. From the collapse of the forest industry in British Columbia to the lack of adequate housing for a growing population, it seems that this government has only one answer to all problems: more taxes. Meanwhile, Canadians don't see a penny of progress. And speaking of Trudeau's economic strategy, we can't forget his disastrous handling of trade tariffs. While other leaders have managed to win significant trade concessions, Trudeau is content to sign deals that leave Canada at a disadvantage. Poilievre recalled how, under Harper's leadership, Canada was able to lift tariffs on softwood lumber in as little as 90 days, while Trudeau, after nearly a decade in power and with 3 U.S. presidents under his belt, has done little more than watch those tariffs double, destroying jobs and hurting communities across the country. Not to mention investment. Poilievre did not skimp on pointing out how Trudeau has turned Canada into an inhospitable place for business. What happened to those promises of economic growth? Instead of incentivizing investment, the Trudeau government has achieved the exact opposite. It has lost more than $500 billion in investments that have fled the country. While other countries, such as the U.S., thrive on favorable tax policies, Canada is increasingly mired in a competitiveness crisis, where companies prefer to move anywhere in the world rather than stay here. And what about the daily lives of Canadians? Poilievre has pointed out the obvious. Trudeau's economy is driving Canadians into misery. Taxes keep rising, the cost of living skyrockets, and families struggle to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Trudeau continues to boast about his economic achievements, ignoring the reality of Canadians who can't find work or cope with bills that keep piling up. But of course, he continues to smile for the cameras, as if everything is fine. Poilievre, with his direct and blunt style, also took the opportunity to highlight Trudeau's ineffectiveness in confronting growing criminality on the streets. What has the Prime Minister done to improve security? Nothing. And if it ever occurs to it to take matters into its own hands, it does so too late, without solid plans and without real support for law enforcement. And while all this is happening, Trudeau continues with his international agenda, playing his role as a global leader while ignoring the country's internal problems. Poilievre does not stop at highlighting the farce behind all this. What is Trudeau telling us? That their global image is more important than the lives of Canadians? The first in a long line of unfulfilled promises is the issue of transport and infrastructure. Poilievre did not miss the opportunity to point out how the Trudeau government has failed to provide effective solutions to the crisis of ports and supply chains. Strikes are paralyzing the country, but instead of acting urgently, Trudeau prefers to juggle his international agenda, leaving the solutions to resolve on their own. Is this the kind of leadership Canada needs? As Poilievre continues his siege, he is dismantling each of Trudeau's arguments. From the charade of his policies on climate change, to the economic catastrophe that has left thousands of Canadians without work, homelessness, and hope. What is Trudeau going to do now? Will he continue to make empty promises while real life collapses around him? Poilievre is clearly willing to keep pushing, demanding answers that Trudeau does not have, and facing a Prime Minister unable to face the realities of the country.